Welcome everyone to A League of His Own, a live photo shelter Q&A. This week we've been hosting an Instagram takeover with today's guest, legendary lifelong sports photographer, born and based in New York City, Rob Tringali. He's here today to talk us through some memorable moments photographed from throughout his career, how he got started as a sports photographer, and how he's approached this career with authenticity and a true passion for visual storytelling. Rob, welcome. We're so excited to have you with us.
Well, thank you for having me. What a great honor. And thanks for Photo Shelter for doing this.
Absolutely.
It's definitely, and obviously, I appreciate what you guys do for guys like me, hosting our images. And it's actually times like this where you're actually happy that your images are in one spot and in a safe kind of place.
For sure.
Something like that doesn't go unnoticed or unappreciated. So anyway, that's. Before I get started, actually, there's a good friend of mine, Anthony Causi, who's in a hospital for the last couple of weeks. I just want to anybody who's a photographer knows who Anthony is, and he's a great friend of mine. I just wanted to say we're all praying for him, and hopefully, we're hoping he gets better, gets home soon, and just wanted to put that out there. This is a crazy time, and everyone should be safe, and kind of hit home when a good friend of yours, is going through what he's going through. So I just wanted to, say we're praying for him, and wishing for the best for him and his family. Anyway, so this is actually a great diversion to do this. I mean, actually, I've been thinking about him a lot. So doing this for the last week, putting this together, has been a great diversion. So I'm looking forward to doing this. So anyway, to begin, I guess when you're 16 years old and you don't make your high school baseball team, your aspirations of being a major league player is probably not going to happen. So. As a sports fan, I wanted to obviously be in sport. I wanted to get into sports somehow. And even though my dad was a photographer and he had an agency, photography to me just wasn't a thing that, as a teenager, obviously I wanted to play. But like I said, at 16, I knew that I had to start looking at a career, and I wanted to be around sports. And that's kind of when the photography thing started to, look as a possibility of being able to be on a field and be in sports somehow. And so I decided to be a photographer. I graduated high school. I assisted one of my dad's photographers, and I got the bug as soon as I walked onto a field. I said, this is what I have to do for my in my life. And it was hard, honestly. The first I started about 18. I think I went to college for a couple of days, a school of visual arts, and told them I wanted to be a sports photographer, and they looked at me like, I had like 3 heads, and I said, all right, I'm out of here. I'm just going to do it myself. And that's what I did. So, and, we're talking about the annual focus film days. It was not easy. And I wasn't very good at it. I was actually pretty terrible at it. So, I'll go to the first, let's see, can I do? So this is the beginning. So anyway, this is like, again, like I said, my first few years were really hard, but this is an image I made when I was 18. This is an image of Florence Griffith Joyner, who was a huge track and field star. This is when she broke the 100-meter record in Indianapolis, like a hot August day. And, it was an image I always, even though I struggled the first few years of my life, just trying to survive. It was an image I always looked back and made, and it was that adrenaline rush of making a cool image from a big moment that always, kind of pushed me forward to like, all right, this is the career you want, and you have to get better at it. And I really, I went to high school games. I practiced my manual focus every chance I can get. It was just literally trying to perfect this craft. And, and after, probably, a few years after that, there was a group of guys that were the quintessential stock photographers that would literally just go from game to game, week to week, and just shoot everything and everything. Baseball, football, golf, soccer, tennis, you name it. And I wanted to be part of that pack, very badly. So I had got a night job in the city. I made everything I made. I invested back into equipment, film, and I traveled around the country. And after a few years, I kind of started to get better at it. And it was like I said, it was a very, it was one of those things that the baseball schedule came out, football schedule came out, and you're your own boss, and you just went from season to season, week to week, shot as much as you could. And, so this was like, back in the, the slide days. So you would, So this is a guy like Barry Sanders would, he would make you a lot of money if you ended up getting some good images of him. So and it was literally like baseball cards. It was a lot of it was vertical, format, 600 lenses, John Elway, 600, 400. It was a lot of it was just very tight, vertical action. It was, like card companies, posters, magazine covers, and it was flying up to San Francisco. You would do a college game on a Saturday, shoot a pro game on a Sunday. I mean, and shoot as much as you possibly could. It was just, it was a very lucrative business. This is Dan Marino, and it was a time of my life, actually. From a guy in his mid-20s, traveling around to every big game, every weekend, a college game, a pro game, baseball season, tennis tournaments, golf tournaments, and it was fun. You didn't listen to, you had no boss. You were your own boss. You paid your own way, your airfare. Like I said, film and processing, and it was a lot. I mean, you could go to a, you can go to a, game in California, airline ticket, whatnot, and 80 rolls of film and processing, and you're in a whole, $1,500, let's say. But again, like I said, there was, at the end of the day, it was a good business. And there were times where like a baseball card company or a card company would come into the office after a season and just sift through your files, over a weekend, and then cut you a big check at the end of the day. And like I said, from somebody in their mid-20s, traveling around, we stayed in good hotels. There's a group of us that would always get together the Saturday before a game and have a good dinner. And I mean, there was honestly nothing like it. So again, and that was it. So that was like probably the first 8 to 10 years of my life was week to week, schedule to schedule. That's what I did, and it was still one of some of the best times of my life. Is that 8 to 10 year stretch of just again, shooting a lot of stocks, shooting a lot of images, and having a fun time, just going to sporting events and whatnot. So
Rob, so awesome to see that.
Yep.
Yeah. Before we jump into the next section here, we wanted to open it up for some questions based on this first little venture in your career. So if anyone has any questions about this first little section, we're definitely open to fielding those questions to Rob. So let us know.
Yeah, I'm seeing actually a great question right here from Holly, who asked early on if it was hard to get press credentials.
Actually, it wasn't. I mean, like I said, my dad was in the business, so I mean, so I personally had a little easier time. But there were again, it was a lot of it was all freelance. So clients would be happy to give you a credential, knowing that you're going to go out and spend your own dime to do these things, and they would have access to those images. So it was actually to me, it wasn't. There was a lot of people who were looking for images. So to hook on with a magazine or a card company or whatever, to me it didn't seem like it was that difficult. Again, awesome. I might have had better advantage than maybe others, but to me there wasn't that many people doing it. Honestly, it wasn't like it is now. It's really oversaturated now for the most part. But there wasn't that many people, and there wasn't that many people willing to go spend that much money to go out and do it. So it was definitely a smaller pool of people who were actually doing it back then.
Definitely. And one last question from Mark. He asked, what did you do with all of your film and slide files in this digital era?
I have a storage unit that I spend about $300 a month on that stores filing cabinets on top of filing cabinets, and I pick through it here and there. In this time is actually a good time to do more of it. So yeah, it's I have some in my office, but some of the better stuff in my office, but I do have a whole storage unit of filing cabinets.
Awesome. And just a heads up for everybody, I'm not going to be able to get to everyone's questions, but we are going to do a Q&A at the end. So feel free to keep sending them. And for anybody that might have not gotten their question read, I can certainly try it on. But Rob, back to you.
Okay. So the next adventure. So this is like, I'm probably in my mid to late 20s at this point. The business was changing. There was less card companies, there was less poster companies, and you could see, at least from my vantage point, you could see that at least from the freelance stock perspective, it was changing. And I think looking back, I wanted to kind of become a different photographer. I mean, it was fun, but it was, kind of, like I said, it was very isolated, and you shot mostly this vertical format. And, I wanted to be more of a, like a magazine photographer. And so Sports Illustrated was obviously a dream when I first started, but they had their, staff guys in New York, Heinz Klutemeyer and Chuck Solomon and Johnny Icona. So there were guys like that I knew my Sports Illustrated being a possibility for a staff job was just not, probably from a New York's perspective, wasn't going to happen. But ESPN magazine was starting up, and we did some prototypes. And I'll get to the next.
I got you, Rob.
You got it. So next image.
Go for it.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, ESPN was starting up, ESPN magazine. We worked on, I helped them with some prototypes in like '97, and they would due to come out in '98, and that's really where I put my effort into. Like I want to work for them, and I want to be, whether it was staff or whether it was just like contract photographer. That's they were young, hip, and it's kind of right in my wheelhouse as far as like a perfect opportunity for me. And I did everything I could to kind of make sure I went up there as much as I could, see saw the photo directors and editors and whatnot, and did a lot of spec work as they were putting it all together. This image, this cover of McGuire, was like one of their first, maybe the third cover that they ever did. And like I said, that it led to the next couple of decades of doing a lot of work for them, and just doing some really cool things. And so that was that was kind of my like into like, hey, I want to be a great photographer. I want to be the best that I could. And to me, like working with them and going to big events was like exactly what I wanted, and it definitely worked out. So I'll hop to the next image. So this was right around that same period. This is a pretty cool story. So this is like May of '98. ESPN had just came out, but I was still doing a lot of spec work. And I think I was on a Sport magazine credential for this game. And this is a David Wells' perfect game at Yankee Stadium in May of '98. And it was one of those games where, you're sitting there, it's in the sixth inning, I'm in the third base photo box. And, I looked at my buddy Brian, I said, man, this guy can pitch a perfect game today. I mean, it just saw what he had. And I think they were playing the Twins, and they had, they couldn't touch him. So about the seventh inning, there was a spot in Yankee Stadium, section 11, which was like right, it was right behind the first, the grandstand between first and home. And it was a spot, where maybe one or two guys would shoot from, it was like an overhead angle. So we went up there and, just to play it safe, like felt like, hey, this is, if something was going to happen, this is a good spot to be. So while I'm sitting there, there was all of a sudden 10, 15, 20 guys cram into this little photo spot. And, I'm looking around, and I knew I was going to be safe there. But my whole thing going forward, hearing from my dad and hearing from guys that, I was looking up to, was always about being different. Always about, trying to just set yourself away from the pack. And I started looking at other possibilities to shoot. And if anybody knows Yankee Stadium, it's not, not the place that you go walk around like the lower home plate and try to make images. I mean, it just wasn't, it was one of those places that if you stepped on the grass the wrong way, or, you get screamed at. So, but I'm sitting there and I'm watching this, I'm sitting there trying to weigh the possibilities of like, just making a different shot. And I said, I wanted to get the shot with the scoreboard. To me, that was the quintessential perfect game image. So at one point, like in the eighth inning, I decided I put my long lens, my 400 millimeter lens, I left it there. I took my 7200 lens, and the only thing I had going for me is I knew a security guy down low, and I went down to him and just kind of pleaded with him, say, hey, this is history. If there's any way you can let me in here. And he kind of just let me in, and forever grateful. Anyway, but I'm sitting there, it's still the film days. Top of the ninth comes up, Wells has to get 3 more outs, and my hands are sweating. At one point I had to change a roll of film between a batter and to put a fresh roll of film in. And normally it wasn't that hard to do in between pitches, but like when your hands are like soaked in sweat, it becomes a little bit more difficult. but I wanted to make sure I got the last batter, the last out. So I'm sitting on my tippy toes, and sure enough, Wells throws, gets a batter to pop up to right field, gets a perfect game, the whole thing. So now I'm like, I'm trying to make real, I'm trying to get ESPN. I'm trying to be on there and be like, hey man, so I immediately called them up, and there was a Simon Barnett was the director of photography. And I called him up and I said, hey Simon, I saw Wells' perfect game, and I know they were closing that day. ESPN would close every 2 weeks. And he said, hey, I think we just closed the magazine, but let me get back to you. Comes back, he said, hey Rob, we literally just closed the magazine for the issue. I appreciate you calling. So I get in my car, and Maureen Cavanaugh from Sports Illustrated calls me up and says, hey Rob, we didn't have anybody at the game. She's like, any chance you could, were you there? I said, yeah, I was there. She's like, can you get the film to the office? Wait around. We'll have it processed in an hour. And I was like, that's cool. It'd be cool to get a shot in Sports Illustrated. So I'm driving down the West Side Highway. ESPN calls me up. Simon's like, we just had a quick meeting. We'd love to get that image in the issue. And I was like, my heart sank, because like, here it is. I'm trying to get in with ESPN. They just started. This is my future as far as I was concerned. And I have to kind of just tell. I mean, I wasn't going to go back on my word with Maureen. And I said, hey Simon, I said, listen, I said, SI called me right after you did, after I called you, and he said, I promised them the film, and I thought I was never going to hear from ESPN again. So anyway, but he was cool. He was like, hey, you know what, our bad. And but I got down to SI, got to their lab, the Time Life lab, and after an hour, like Jimmy Colton, who was worked there, giving this huge high five when he came out with the roll of film. He came out with the process film, and it ran like a double page. And it was one of those moments as a photographer that perfect games don't happen. They have that. There's like maybe 23 of them in the history of baseball. So Yankee Stadium, the whole thing. So one of those things that sets you up. Like you make an image like that, and you feel like you did something. It was, nobody else has this image, and something that looking back at it, I'm extremely happy with. And that literally from that point on, it was to me, what separates the great photographers, and to me it was always about being trying to be the best photographer I can be, and set myself into that echelon of guys. And it was when you shoot sports, a lot, there aren't that many moments that are great even over a 30-year career. So when you get the opportunity, to me, what separates the best from the rest of the pack is when you get the opportunity, you don't mess it up. And to me, going forward, it was just like, hey man, I want to be in those precious situations, and I want to I want to be able to deliver it. And I think any photographer knows that every once in a while you'll miss a shot, and it hurts a lot. and it's one of those things you go home with, and it's hard to get over. But anyway, so that kind of led to to going through some other images. This was an image of Jeter. I think this was 04, and Jim Serber, my good buddy, senior editor at ESPN. I remember he asked me like, hey, we're doing a feature on Jeter. Can you let's try to get a great image of him. This is from old Yankee Stadium. This photo area, it looks like it's cool here, but it was blocked out like 90% of the time from home plate, umpires, coaches. But it's one of those. Any advice for younger photographers? It's like one of those things, like you don't leave the subject. And so this particular shot, Jeter is literally rounding third. I'm shooting his back, and in one motion, he basically slides, pops himself up, turns in my direction, and a fist pump. And it's like one of those things, like it always you kind of tells you as a photographer, just never leave the subject, just stay on it, just follow it through till the end. You just never know what's going to happen. And this is a perfect example of something like that, where it was easy shooting his back just to lose concentration for a second. And these things happen in a nanosecond. I mean, if you ever look at the highlights, something like this, and you look at it, it's like bang bang, it's over. And if you're not there, if you're not concentrating, you lose it. I mean, if you ever looked at Neil Lifer Ali, the famous Ali picture. I mean, if you ever look at the videotape of that, it's just a quick, it just happens in a such a small, finite, second that if you're not, you're not concentrating, you're gonna miss it. And like I said, these are the things as a sports photographer you just don't miss. You just, they happen, and there's no safety net. And it's definitely part of the adrenaline rush of why guys love doing it, because there is no do-over. It happens, it's over, and you either make it, you're the hero, or you're not, and that's that. So moving on. This is Scott Norwood against the Giants in the Super Bowl. The week before, I was in San Francisco, and I was on the other end of the field, and I was still a fan. I was still a fan. I was 20 years old. I'd watched every Giant game growing up, and so I was still just an idiot fan. And I ended up being in a terrible spot. And if you ever look at a highlight from when they played San Francisco, there's a idiot kid in a yellow sweatshirt pumping his fist, and that's me. And anyway, so the week later, so they get to the Super Bowl. And I had to talk with myself during that week, saying, "Hey, you know what? If you're gonna do this, you can't be a fan. You're gonna have to just, get that out of your system." And it was a week later. There was no in between week that year. I get to Tampa, Giants playing the Bills, and anyway, so so it came down to a game-winning field goal. This way, it was Buffalo now a chance to win the Super Bowl. I ended up going to the other end of the field. I'm still very green about shooting football. I hadn't really done it that long at that point. And then who do I sit next to? I see Walter Yo sitting there, and I was like, wow, this might be. It was a timeout, so I ended up sitting next to him, and I said, well, this might be a cool angle. And maybe a little more advice for anybody. Always find somebody that you think is. It knows what they're doing, and sit next to them if you have any inkling of if you're unsure of where to be. So anyone who's a football fan, if you say wide right, this is wide right, and it's one of those Super Bowl moments that I'll always remember, and happy to have an image like this. And just going forward, back in ESPN, this was like, again, they closed every issue every 2 weeks. And this is more about like just talking about the film days. Go back to that one, Chair. Yeah, that's this one. You got to go to this one. Anyway, so this is a good story where we were in Denver. This is the Jet Broncos championship game in '98, I believe, maybe January of '99, and again we were shooting film, and this was one of those things where we had to get the film on a plane back to New York because ESPN was closing that night. So we only had the first maybe hour of the game to shoot. We had a messenger in the parking lot. So it's always fun to look back at some moments where you had to make this great frame maybe in an hour, and had it deliver to get to a messenger who got to the airport, got on a plane from Denver back to New York, and just talking about some older moments. Which you reflect on, and they're pretty cool. Alabama, and then we saw somebody from Alabama signed in before, but this is they won they beat Georgia in the championship game a few years ago. This is a game-winning touchdown. It definitely helps to be lucky sometimes, to be in the right spot, but and executing at the same time. So again, one of those moments. One of those the all-time bat flips, Manny Ramirez at Fenway winning a big playoff game against the Angels. Another Red Sox, I'm throwing a lot of Red Sox stuff in there. This was a David Ortiz game-winning home run in Fenway. This was the year where the Red Sox were down to the Yankees 3-0, and they had this epic comeback. And this was Game 4 of that series that basically got the Red Sox, and they won the next 4 games, got to the World Series, broke the curse, and again, just moments that it's one of the best college football games ever. This was a Texas and USC at the Rose Bowl. This is Reggie Bush. And next one, Jerry. All right. Go back to this one. This was all the baseball games I've shot. I've never seen a pitcher throw his glove as Puig hit a home run. This was even though the Red Sox won the World Series, this could have been a great image if the Dodgers ended up winning that series. It's actually Kobe Bryant in the background, which I didn't realize until just a little bit ago. but yeah, it's, again, one of those moments that are pretty cool. Just iconic players like Emmitt Smith scoring touchdowns, and one of the great baseball games I've ever been to. This was the Cardinals. They came back, a big comeback against the Rangers in the World Series in 2011. And sometimes you get a little lucky, but it's just, Piazza and Clemens had a World Series. Another iconic player, Jerry Rice. I don't do a lot of remote work, but this is a remote in Fenway. The Red Sox clinching to get to the World Series at a ALCS clinching game. And then another remote shot. This is from the Vancouver Olympics, where Team Canada beat the USA in overtime, Sidney Crosby, and still probably one of the loudest arenas that I've heard. It was just like, when Team Canada won, the place went just crazy, and the whole city went crazy that night. Again, I don't do a lot of remote work. This was my buddy Dan Merritt. He was at the time where as a director of marketing at the Red Bulls, called me up and he said, "Hey, we're looking to get some different angles of our team." He saw my work and he was referred to me by someone, and Jen Aborn actually, and so I got to the stadium and I looked at the scoreboard and I said, "Well, there's a place you could hang over the goal." And he's like, "Hey man, if let's go up there, give it a shot." And so we went there before the game. It's kind of scary I'm not a big heights person, but game starts, I get up there, you kind of have to hang over the scoreboard, a pretty good distance to get this angle. And this is Henry, who's a great player for Arsenal, and luckily he scores this great goal within 5 minutes. So as soon as he did that, and as soon as I saw the frame, I got the hell out of there. But again, a frame that I'm pretty happy with. Sarah Hughes, one of the great figure skating performances at the 2002 Olympics in Salt Lake City. Again, one of those moments that just happened. She jumps perfectly, the Olympic rings in the background, and definitely from an Olympic side, and just general action. That's me shooting with a lot more darker hair there. And again, that's the image from there. And again, this is to me, it's always a thrill. It's always a thrill to be on the sideline and shooting. And just from that perspective, there's never a time in a big game where I go to where I don't appreciate the access and being able to look behind me and seeing people in the stands and knowing I have this, one of the best seats in the house. And with that, it's nice to know that you can, making images from those vantage points that most people don't ever get a chance to experience. So to me, it's still very, a really cool, special thing to me. And then I'll move on. So that's, to me, that was the quintessential action, peak action moments. And those are a handful of my highlights in my career. And so moving on to this section was I think for the first 5 or 6 years, I was always intimidated by the scrum. The scrum image is when after a team wins a championship, that big rush to the middle of the field and that just adrenaline rush. And when we talk about authenticity, this is these moments that are not scripted, and is this incredible celebration. And again, the first 5 years, I would watch it from a distance, and then at one point because I didn't think you could, I didn't know how you guys made pictures back when, in that massive humanity. But at one point, I was like, I got to go for it. And honestly, I really enjoy it. It's fun to kind of, be in the middle of it all and just, guys celebrating and whatnot. And so this to me was, these sets of images are to me, that's Joe Torre when they beat the Mets in 2000. This is the Red Sox in 2014. And it's an amazing feeling to be in the middle of this. You just feel the energy. You feel a team that just played its whole season and finally gets to celebrate. There's something really special about these moments, and it's you're right there. And so there are times you're just man, I can't believe all the years I've watched sports on TV as a kid, and then you pinch yourself. I'm in the middle of this, this is the Red Sox again. I got a lot of Red Sox. I didn't realize that. This has been a Red Sox, they, 04 when they finally got to win a World Series after the curse. There's the classic Gatorade. This is Ohio State winning college championship game. It's fun to have one of those. I'm not a big fan of locker room stuff. I think, sometimes I think lately it's gotten a little too staged, but every once in a while it was fun to do over the years. And, again, being in the middle of it, it's cool to, again, see that excitement, that celebration. There's a few more of these, just more Super Bowls and, and again, it's fun. I mean, it's fun to, you got, other photographers, other video guys, you got sound people, you got all these guys, and it's just, to me, it's just like, it's a, what's the word I'm trying to think? It's a rush. I mean, it's a rush to get to the middle of it, trying to be in the middle of it, trying to walk backwards while you're taking pictures and try not to trip and, just have people just trample over you. But yeah, there's definitely definitely one of those things that, there's an excitement to at the same time. This is Brady. This is one of the better events I've ever shot. This is the 06 World Cup where Italy beat France. And anyway, and then with that, this is last year's Super Bowl. With that comes some tender moments. While the celebration is happening, there's usually the family gets on the field, and and every once in a while you'll get a chance to. This is Brady and his daughter a couple of Super Bowls ago, and just one of those moments that you catch. And again, so this kind of happens a little bit off, and you just as you're shooting it, you kind of always have to have your eyes looking around you, see what's happening, because it is a chaotic scene, but you just do your best to try to find images, and every once in a while you'll just maybe get lucky and stumble upon this is one of those images. And this is A-Rod, when his last game at Yankee Stadium with his daughters, same kind of thing. There's little cool moments. And then we'll move on to so this I call these now the thoughtful images. We move on from like the peak action to the scrum stuff. Now these are images. The next few images will be like things that were more thoughtful. And by what I mean is this is David Nalbandian, and I shot him in Miami. Maybe early that year or whatever, and I noticed that he was a big sweater, but it was like high noon. You couldn't really, get the sweat coming off his arms the way you would in a backlit situation. But fast forward to a U.S. Open, I looked at the schedule. It was like one of these hot, humid August days in New York, and I see Nalbandian playing at an outside court later in the day, and I was like, in my head, I was like, man, this might be one of those times where, the sweat might be, coming off his body, and you get, backlit, there's a little rim light. And sure enough, I got there, the sun's really dropping. It's late in the day, and I had maybe a few minutes to catch him, and with the sun still on him a little bit. And but I knew he was a big sweater, and I was like, just hammer away. And it was cool to get an image of him with the sweat pouring off his arms and his head. Again, more thoughtfulness. Same thing with Mariano. Mariano's last year, Rivera, trying to do some different angles of him as, he played his last season with the Yankees, and, went to the bleachers, and, kind of knew that every time he came out of the bullpen, the crowd would get up and, put their cameras up. So again, definitely something that as a photographer, you just have to kind of always process, where you can shoot these different angles from, and just, trying to find angles or, images that, again, have a little bit more, like I said, some thought that goes into them a little. Dallas, this is like, at a certain time of day in Dallas, the light comes through this glass, end of the stadium there, and with the sun, you can make these cool images. This is Verlander in the bullpen at a World Series a few years ago, and again, it's easy to sit in your photo box, and but I'm sitting there, and I know Verlander's like a Hall of Fame pitcher. He's in the bullpen. I you can see the light from where you are during maybe in the pregame. You see where the light's gonna fall, and you're like, hey man, I'm gonna fight through the crowd and go to the bullpen, and there's gonna be nice light there, and And again, it's one of those things that, really, it's easy to get lazy sometimes, but, I went out to the bullpen, lights like perfect. I see Verlander there, and then national anthem starts, and it's one of those images you make that, I remember, you post images like this, and, people really appreciate those, those little touches, and again, it's the same thing. You go to shoot a kayaker, you find the person on the course, say, where's a good spot for, some wipeouts, a lot of prep, so preparation goes into involved, in a lot of these things. And, and then there's the happy accident pictures where, your autofocus hits a snowflake, and you work it. This is still shooting film back when, but, it's one of those moments that you just, definitely call these the happy accidents pictures. And then, then it's the off moments. Then it's the images that to me mean a lot to me now. Because probably early on I didn't really pay attention to a lot of these quieter moments in the sports. It was always about the peak action, the moment, and the game-winning touchdown. But probably over the last little bit, I've really come to really appreciate these little, I call them these off moments in sports. And it's nice to shoot for, MLB and have access to images like this, Drew Brees, and just like these quiet moments. Again, when I first started, I probably didn't pay attention to a lot of these images, and but more and more so, I probably appreciate these images more so now than even the classic, action photo. And let's run through some of these. They're quieter. We did, I was lucky enough to shoot with the XFL this year, and we had such great access. And again, it's getting that access over time, and people trusting you is also a big benefit. And I think that's one of those things that happens over time. And again, there's more of that. And just do these things. And that gets me to so yeah. There's also over a three decade career. There's assignments that you really do look back and they'll always be a big deal to you. And this is we did this one game, one day thing with LSU and Alabama for ESPN magazine, where we covered a game from every possible angle. And it was like they literally hired 18 photographers, 17, 18 photographers to cover this game, and all different guys, all different, portrait photographers and landscape photographers and still life photographers and documentary photographers. And we had full access to this one game. We shot everything imaginable, but it was probably the greatest learning experience in my life, where I watched how 17, 18 other photographers just looked at and shot an event. And everyone kind of had a different, take on it. And it was, to me, one of the most, amazing things to see is how somebody could look at the same thing that you looked at and just can see it completely different. And since then, I've always thought about images I shoot and how to just make them a little bit different, see the image inside the image, having that experience being around all these other guys and, seeing things that were very normal to me and how other guys, envisioned them and shot it was, really, a very cool learning thing. And like I said, we had, all access to that game. And, one of those assignments that, like you wish that, it would happen more often, because, they were, pretty special. This is a bucket list. This was San Moritz. This was I talked myself a little assignment to go out to San Moritz and shoot these horses on this frozen lake. And, they do it every, February. They do it a couple of Saturdays in February every year. And, it's mind blowing to see. I got to spend a day with Will Ferrell for HBO. He played in 5 spring training games. A couple of spring trainings ago, a few spring trainings ago, and that's one of those things that are cool to look back at. And another bucket list was I got to hang out of a blimp at the All-Star game in '08. There's a lot longer story to this, but again, one of those things I look back at, and it was fun to hang around, New York City for a night. And then, it goes into a few assignments that really, few events that really stand out. And the seeing the Cubs win the 2016 World Series, a team that hadn't won a World Series in over 100 years, and the pain that the fans and the team, in the city went through. And then it didn't look good for the first little bit. Again, as a sports photographer, there are times where you just, you're documenting history, and that series will always be a big deal to me. I ended up, Jessica Carroll is the director of photography at MLB. I think game 5 was like, I said, I think I just want to shoot this game from outside the stadium. And I think at this point, she kind of just lets me do what I feel like doing. Anyway, because she just, lets me, again, it's nice to have clients that, trust you and let you do things. But actually, all the baseball games I've ever shot in my life, probably some of the most fun time I've ever had was like I shot game 5 in Chicago. Literally I shot the first 8 innings outside the stadium, and it was just a spectacular moment, and and it was fun. It was fun, and then the series went back to Cleveland, and they won this epic game 7, and then they a team that hadn't won in over 100 years. Finally does it. Again, it's cool to document history like this, something that and then you got to go to Cuba with President Obama at the time, and did a couple of trips in Cuba. Just did MLB did a goodwill tour there, and then it was a spring training game. That was definitely on the one of the highlights of my career. And then we'll finish it with so a couple of players. If you're a guy who shoots for a while, there's a couple of athletes. There's athletes that hopefully you get to shoot from the beginning of their career to the end of their career. And I think two athletes that were basically resemble that is Mariano Rivera and Derek Jeter. And you shoot them in spring training as a kid. As their kids, 19, 18, and then you basically follow them their whole career. And with the Yankees, you got to see a bunch of championships, a bunch of huge moments, playoff games, and then and then one night it ends. One night, you get to see it, be completed. And this was in 2013 where Mariano, retired his last game as a Yankee. And it is, I mean, it's hard to put into words sometimes, like what it feels like to actually shoot a guy from when he's 20, and guys that probably at the time I wasn't that much older than, maybe a handful of years, and progressed through their career, and see it kind of finally come to an end. And so in my head, at least in this particular game, so Mariano retires. It was a cool little moment, and then in my head I had this image of Mariano walking down the dugout and walking away from me with the empty dugout and his number 42 as he walked to the far end of the dugout to go into the locker room. Usually when you have an image in your head, it usually doesn't play out that well. But anyway, so Mariano does this thing on the field. It's over. He's finally ready to leave. I was ready to make this image. He goes down the stairs, and I was the first person down the stairs behind him, and I just wanted him to walk away from me, but he decides to just sit there. He sat like 3 feet from me, and I'm sitting there going, oh shit, man. I felt almost at the time, I was just too close to him, and it was just me and him in the dugout, and he just sits there, and it's something that I'll always remember. It's something that, he sat there with this, just this look on his face, this looking at the field. It's his last moment as a Yankee. He's just taking it all in for the last time, and this glazed look on his face, and it was just eerily quiet. And as I don't even want to hit the shutter that often. It was just like I clicked it. I just want to be as unobtrusive as possible. I really wanted to give him his time. It was one of the maybe the only moment of my career where I'm shooting and I actually felt like, I didn't actually belong there. And I wanted to give him his space. I wanted him to kind of, do his, just take it all in. Maybe every 10, 15 seconds I hit the button, and it seemed like an eternity he sat there for. Again, one of those images you look back and, you're just a guy who's, it's his last game and in this empty dugout, just glazing and just, you think about it. And that moves me to the, Derek Jeter, who was just another guy that I shot his whole career, spring training as a 18-year-old, 19-year-old kid wearing some high number. He comes up in 95 and, they win a World Series in 96. And, I shot, almost, every big game he played in. You see this guy become like a king of New York over his career. And then all of a sudden one September night, it's over. His last game in Yankee Stadium, and as a photographer, you're sitting there going, I shot this guy his whole career. I have to make a good image. His last game, I have to make a good image. It's like shooting a movie, or you need the good final scene. I mean, everything else doesn't matter unless you come up with a great final scene image. And it was to me it was a lot of pressure, walking into the stadium that night, and so. Shot a lot of Jeter that year in the last few months, and the last maybe week or two, he was doing this little hop out of the dugout, and I was starting to notice like, hey man, that might be a really cool image to create. And I knew it was going to have to be a remote shot. It was gonna, I would have to put a remote down on the ground. So we got to the stadium that night, and I knew they would let us photographers shoot from the first base coach at coaching box as he came out of the dugout. So I put a remote there, and I remember a Yankee PR director looked at me and said, "Hey Rob, there's no way you can keep a remote there." And I don't know what kind of look I gave him, but it was definitely a look of like, you can't move that remote, and it's got to stay there. And he was really cool about it. He actually ended up standing right next to it just in case anybody ran that direction, which we were pretty clear, but he did me a favor. He stood behind the remote, making sure that no one would trip over it. But it's one of those images you fire off from, and then you look at the back of the camera, and then you see this image, and the thank you Derek, and he's looking back in his last game as a Yankee, and it's like, so then the game starts, and of course in Jeter mode, he wins the game with a game-winning hit. This is another remote shot from above. So he wins the game, and then it was just these little, I was happy to get these last couple of images, just him by himself, just saluting the crowd with his hat, and it was cool, really clean, just that loneliness, the thank you Derek's, the crowd, Yankee Stadium, the epic facade, and I was, again, from a guy who shot his whole career, I was happy to end it, the way I ended it. It's the proper way to do it. And I'll flick through a couple of covers, just some stuff that I've done, and that's that section. Jeremy.
Rob, what can I say? So many great photos. It's unbelievable. Yeah, I like how you just went through your covers. Like, I'll just show you some of this stuff.
Yeah, anyway.
You have such great work. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. We have one more little section. I know we're running a little late, but I want people to stick with us if they'd like to. Definitely stick around. We'll answer more questions. We'll take a question or two right now, and then we have one more short little section to go. So let's take another question or two, Caitlin.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a ton of really thoughtful questions. Scott asked about the choice between black and white versus color in your photos.
It's a good one. It's a good question. I think, there's a classicness to the black and white, especially when the Yankees, and I always think about it, always look, that uniform always looks good in black and white. Some stadiums are, really messy as far as color wise. Is like, so the black and white usually cleans up, some of these colors, and some, you have images where in the background you might have like a green, like security jacket. So I always felt like sometimes the black and white, but I think I've gotten away from that. I think it was definitely a stretch that I liked it. But yeah, I think as a photographer, you kind of go through little phases, and, you really take it into, you really, I don't know how to answer it honestly, but I think you go through like a phase, and I think there was a time where it just looked cool in black and white, and you move on. So, I mean, I think we all kind of go through our phases, and but I think there were times where I really liked it, especially with the Yankee stuff. I thought there was definitely with their uniform. I always thought it just looked looked better in black and white to me. But I do get that question a lot.
And then this one, I assume you probably also get a lot, is from Brooke. And, they're asking just kind of the best advice you have for a photographer just starting out in the industry right now.
Just be yourself. I mean, honestly, just like find the things that you enjoy doing. I mean, and to me, it's like, unless you're doing what you love to do, I don't know if you can be successful. So I think you have to kind of find the things that really mean a lot to you. And that's the best answer I have, is just find something that you're passionate about and just go for it, and whatever that might be.
Love that. Back to you, Rob.
Good.
Yeah, right. Let's go.
So awesome. We'll finish this up with. So there's a time of your life where you're just like, all right, I gotta just make my own stories, and I said I shot 26 Super Bowls at one point in a row, and then one year I get a call from ESPN. They changed their creative team, and they were going to move on, and they called me and they said, hey, you know what, we're going into a different direction this year. So anyway, fast forward, I shot the next couple of Super Bowls I sat home, and one year I was like, I gotta, Philadelphia was in the Super Bowl, and I said, I called Marguerite at Sports Illustrated, and I said, listen, I'd love to go down to Philadelphia and just document the, the city in Philly, as our team was playing in the Super Bowl. And I mapped it out, found out, and I just went down there that Sunday and spent the whole day going through different neighborhoods and just made a bunch of images. These fans in Philly, and to me, it's like interesting from a guy who shot a lot of Super Bowls, that one of my best memories is spending a day in Philadelphia, 1,500 miles away from where the game was being played, and it was something to see. It was something to see a whole city just get elated, as that team won. I mean, again, like the incredible. The excitement that that this was like the best day of a lot of these people's lives, and just to be able to kind of walk around the city and see this elation. We were in South Philly when they won the game, and this whole community got this intersection and just celebrated. And then we marched down to like Broad Street. We marched out to Broad Street, and just a massive humanity, and people were climbing telephone poles and climbing on whatever they could climb on. It was kind of hairy. I had an assistant with me. There was a point we were almost like crushed to death. But again, like from a Super Bowl memory, it's definitely a highlight. Just being part of that, being in the middle of it. And again, it was one of those stories that you pitch and you do it, and it's nothing taken away from like shooting the live action, live sporting events, but there is something to be said about finding your own story and just executing it, and it's yours and it's nobody else's. And this is like an example I give to a lot of people is they're out there. I mean, you just got to find them. You got to be okay with it. You got to be, you got to take some chances. And it's not always about being in the, the arena where, these stories happen. There's sports stories that happen everywhere, every place, from high school, fields to, wherever. So, they're out there. This is another one for ESPN. I did a lot of stuff in spring training over the years, and I pitched a story to ESPN about everything that happens at a spring training site before 9 a.m. in the morning. And so we would get there, I spent like a week doing this assignment, and we get there at 4 a.m. and hang out with the cook as he's cooking up steaks and like something like this. This is like 5 o'clock in the morning, and he's preparing the day's food and just the stuff in the weight room. Again, just something that was over the years you just pay attention to, and you store in your memory bank, and you're like, this possibly can be a good story. you pitch it. You know, again, it's not easy. It's not easy to pitch these things. You know, there's a lot of layers of, you know, getting people to give you access, and it's not as easy as picking up a credential and going to a game. But, you know, again, it's your story. It's your thing. Nobody, you know, and there is something that, you know, over the last little bit, I've really come to really enjoying. And the last one is one of my favorite stories. Was a kid's golf story. There's a tournament in North Carolina in Pinehurst they do every year. It's these kids from 6 years old to like 12 years old. And I hooked up with this kid, Isaiah, and he was great. His dad was great, and we followed him for a week as he went down to this tournament in North Carolina. And, you know, and Isaiah was awesome, and all these other kids were, you know, these were 6. You know, Isaiah was 6, and, you know, the level of golf play was just spectacular. This is my buddy's kid, Bronx, and Bronx is awesome. And this is a fun story. It's one of those stories that you just you research. You know, a buddy of mine kind of told me about it. I did some research on it, and this is Bronx. His mom wanted him to use another club, and he didn't want to, and he shanked his club of choice into the woods, and his mom had to pick him up and carry him to the green. So, I mean, these are, you know, again, these are fun stories. I mean, I really, you know, this is Tommy Marsh. You would never know Tommy has had one arm. I mean, the way he acted, the way he talked, and the way he was a great golfer. And like, these stories are there. I mean, these stories are out there, and you just have to, you know, sometimes, you know, the live sports is such a merry-go-round. It goes from season to season, and, you know, it's hard to, you know, sometimes it's hard to get off. I think you got to force yourself to get off, and just explore some different, you know, different ideas, different things. And I think that's it, Jeremy. We'll end it there. There you
go. So awesome, Rob. I love those stories. Yeah, taking it off the field is something a lot of people, I mean, at least myself, don't think about too often. So.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, people ask me, how do I get a credential? How do I, you know, I need to go shoot a Yankee game, and I'm like, you know, there's so much sports out there. There's so many stories out there that don't require, you know, a credential. I mean, you could talk to your, you know, local high school. You could talk to your, you know, local college, and, you know, try to get access to whatever. But, you know, it's, you know, it takes a lot of research, and, you know, trying to find the story, try to get people to give you access. But they're out there. They are there, and they are a lot of fun. I mean, those are probably the ones that, you know, mean the most to me, because they are so unique to what I do. Like, you know, no one has those. And
right.
So, yeah, it's always been cool to do those. And I look forward to doing more and more of that.
Awesome. Well, if for those who can stick around for another 15 or so minutes, we're going to take some more questions. So thank you for hanging in there. Yeah, let's take a few more questions for Rob, and then we'll wrap up after this short Q&A.
Perfect. And just another reminder for anybody that does have to skip out, we are recording this. So we'll put the full recording up on the blog, including these questions. This is an interesting kind of follow-up to the story you just told, Rob. So one day is asking, if a story you pitch doesn't get picked up, do you still shoot it just for yourself, or do you kind of, you know, wait and see what the answer is there?
Yeah, I think, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think you do. I mean, if you feel that strongly about a story, and for whatever reason you pitch it to somebody and they're, you know, not into it at that time, I think it's, you know, by all means. I mean, you know, again, you weigh the cost of it, you weigh a lot of things, but, you know, I totally, you know, there's no question about it. If you feel, again, and I think, you know, those personal projects are really things that go a long way with editors. I mean, more than just like, you know, a portfolio, you know, a shot from a live event. I mean, I think that somebody sees you, you know, put the time in and execute a story that you're passionate about. I mean, those things go a much longer way with anybody looking at your images from an editor's perspective than anything else you'll ever do. So there's no downside to doing that.
Definitely. And Richard from Fairhope is asking about what method you find to be the most effective to approach directors of photography that you want to work with and, you know, are interested in sort of building that professional relationship with.
Yeah, I've always liked the method of like just seeing people in person. Honestly, I always think that's, to me personally, I've always been better at trying to get a meeting, even though it's hard to do now. But I think just understanding that just emails and Instagrams and whatever you can do, and and then obviously just like a note, just like if an editor worked on a story and did something cool that worked with obviously other photographers, like it's cool to write a note to somebody, say, hey, really loved what you did with that, so just even a cool handwritten note sometimes is a good way to go. But we live in a world now, there's just so many different methods, and but to me it's always been like I've always liked a personal just relationship, but it's really what you're comfortable with. But I got a simple handwritten note or even an email, just say, hey, I love that story you guys just did. Hey, that was great work. Just a simple thing like that. Obviously send your work when you can, and but again, I think the personal projects is also a good way to go. And I think editors really appreciate seeing that you're trying to do something as far as that goes.
Definitely. This is an earlier question that was asked by Holly, but she was wondering about sort of how well you know the players when you're shooting them. Do you know a lot of them at this point?
Yeah, I think they them, they know you. I've always never really was starstruck that much, so it wasn't a big deal. But yeah, again, over time you get to know people, and it does help. I mean, honestly, it does help in certain situations where guys will give you more time, more access, or kind of ham it up for you a little bit. But yeah, it's something that, again, like I've never personally been starstruck, but I have maybe a handful of guys I'm close with, but it does. I mean, as far as knowing players, knowing their tendencies, I think as far as that stuff goes, I mean, knowing the athletes, what their tendencies are and what they do, as far as executing a picture that you want is very helpful. So I think any kind of research you can do beforehand, if you're going to shoot somebody, is beneficial.
Awesome. Landon, who's a student at UNC, asked just about sort of current trends you see in sports photography and where you see the industry going in the next 10 years.
I think after all this, I'm not sure anybody knows yet. I think there's going to be a lot of changes after this, but I'm happy to see that teams are giving their photographers, and leagues are giving their photographers more access. So I'm really happy about that, and guys like Billy at the Red Sox, I think seeing what they do with the access, that was something that was I remember fighting for that a long time ago. And teams are just so reluctant to do that, and it's nice to see that more and more teams and leagues are giving that little behind the curtain stuff. But I think I think access is always cool, and I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure where we're gonna where everything's gonna head, but I think is always, like, obviously you always get a classic storytelling and more of that. So I think you're never gonna that's never gonna get old. I mean, it's always gonna be finding cool stories, finding good, interesting, and they're always there. And I think people are realizing that that's the stuff that's never gonna get old, and that's classic. And it's just to be able to find them and execute a cool story on a player or team, whatever it might be, behind the scenes stuff is that's never going to go away. And I think more and more people understanding that's never going to go away, never going to get old. So find good stories.
Yeah, this is a fun question from LG Patterson. So he hears that he hears you're a big food guy, that you can find great Italian restaurants and Korean barbecue at 3 a.m. after a World Series game, and he asked if you could share a little bit more about your food blog.
Oh my God, really? Yes, me and my wife. In quarantine, me and my wife are like videotaping some of our creations, and it's in the works. LG, I promise you'll be the first one. I'll do a soft soft site for you personally, and get your critique on it. But yeah, we are working that. Yeah. So when you're Italian, when you're Italian, and you have to at least know how to cook a little bit. But yeah, my wife's pretty. No, we are enjoying that, and we actually are building a website and talking about, like, trying to think about things that maybe in the future. It's something something that I think that I would like to do more of. Honestly, there's a creativeness to cooking, so it definitely plays into the whole artisticness of what I feel like I am.
Definitely. And we haven't talked too much about gear. So Holly was also asking, a few of others have just asked sort of, what's in your camera bag? What are your go-tos? Things like that.
If I had my choice, it would be just all prime lenses. At this point, I really like I work a lot with Canon, and to me it's like 85 1.2s and the 50 1.2s and the 24s and the 35 1.4s. I really love the look of a prime lenses and what they deliver. I always think there's just there's just something about them that just they just have a different look than your normal wide zoom lenses. But honestly, everything I shoot is different. I mean, I kind of walk into every event and or everything I shoot, anything I'm shooting, and it's it's always different. I can't say there's any real one method. Any one method that I rely on. It's really just a matter of just I wake up in the morning and just go for it. And like I said, like to me, it's just like it's nice to it's a tool that you need, but to me, it's just I don't know if there's any one way I go about any this particular assignment. But if I had I really love prime lenses, so I would just stick with that. If that's an answer that helps you in any way.
Yeah, and this is a question, probably the final question just because of time, but this is one that I also had. So this is from Casey, and Casey was asking if any of your gear got ruined during all of these celebration images. I see a lot of liquids, being thrown around.
Yeah, when you're in the locker room, when it's champagne, you cover it up as much as you can. No, I did. There was one Super Bowl in Miami that rained the whole game, and I did lose like 2 bodies during. That's like the one time. And Jerry Rice did step on a lens of mine and broke it off the camera body from the lens. Yeah, that was I had this camera body in my office. I had Jerry Rice's cleat marks on this old Nikon D4 camera for a while until the cleat marks kind of ran off. But it was like a $12,000 crash. But so that's as far as gear, that's like, but I've been pretty lucky. I've never been personally I think I have had one foul ball off my thigh, but I've been really, really lucky about just not being physically hurt, or not getting run over, or not getting a baseball to the head or a hockey puck, or so I've been very, really fortunate as far as destruction goes.
That's very lucky.
It is. I feel like I'm cursing myself by saying that. I feel like there's going to be I'm due, but I think there's like I've been fortunate, let's say.
Awesome. Thank you all for your questions.
Yeah. Before we go, definitely a few things here. Definitely check out Rob's photo shelter website, robtringali.com. There's lots of great work on there. Such an awesome portfolio. If you want to see more of his work, you can connect with him on social as well. Rob's Twitter is rtringali, and Rob's Instagram is Rob Tringali. If you're not a Photo Shelter member and you'd like to learn more about how our tools help photographers like Rob show, sell, deliver, and organize their photos all from one place, be sure to visit photoshelter.com, click pricing at the top, and enter code ROB2020 for a 14-day free trial plus 20% off your first year of our standard plan.